Okay, we've done two types of factoring. Factoring out the greatest common factor, which you can do no matter how many terms there are. You can always check to see if they are all divisible by the same number or the same number of x's or whatever. And if they do, you should start by doing that. We have not yet encountered problems where you can do multiple things, so that hasn't happened yet, but it will happen. Then we did factoring by grouping, where we were able to take 4 things and split it up into 2 parentheses. Now we're going to talk about quadratic trinomials and how to factor those. And before I tell you how to factor them, let's do the opposite and let's multiply out these 2 binomials. So when we multiply binomials together, we use the acronym FOIL, or we just use a distributive property, whichever way makes more sense in your head. They literally are the same thing. It's just how you think of them that matters. When I FOIL this out, I do first, which is x times x, so that's x squared. I do outside or outer, and that's x times 2, so 2x. I do 6 times x for the I for inner or inside. And then I do 6 times 2, which is last, and that's 12. And the vast majority of the time, the middle terms here will be like terms that we can add together. So what I want to draw your attention to is that what we're going to be doing is taking answers like this, and we're going to be writing them as 2 sets of parentheses here. So we have to be able to think, how do I split this up? There's no greatest common factor in this, right? And they don't all have an x, so that's not the direction we're going to go. Instead, what we do is we just kind of have to know this first part, that when we have a trinomial, a quadratic trinomial in particular, then if we can factor, likely we'll factor this into 2 parentheses. And then we have to say, okay, this x squared, when we FOILed, came from x times x. And that's basically the only way to get x squared other than 1 times x squared, which we could try but isn't going to help us. So we have an x squared here. We're going to split that up into the first part of each parentheses. Then think about how this 12 happened. The 12 happened because we did the 6 and the 2 together. And so the 12 is going to split up into the last 2 spots. But it has to split up in such a way that we would get our middle terms to add together to get whatever that number is. So I can't split the 12 up into 3 and 4 because 3 plus 4 is 7. And so when I FOIL this out and do outer and inner terms, I'd get 7x instead of 8x. So I'm going to instead have to think, what multiplies to get 12 that adds to get 8? And that's going to be a really, really consistent thing that we do here for the next few things we're factoring. So let's give it a try. On A, x squared plus 11x plus 24, we're going to start with our 2 parentheses. We're going to put an x at the beginning of each because the very first part is splitting up the x squared. Then I'm going to think about 24. I want to split up 24 into 2 things that multiply to get 24. But I'm going to choose the pair of factors that adds up to give me 11. So sometimes I make a list. I like to make lists of factors so that I can make sure I don't miss anything. Our brains will do this funny thing where they'll focus on the first set of factors we think of and won't be able to think of any others. It's really weird. So 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, 4 times 6. Now I didn't have to write down all of them if I figured out which one was going to work ahead of time. But if I did, then now I'm looking for which of these add to get 11. This adds to get 25, this adds to get 14, this adds to get 11, this adds to get 10. So 3 and 8 is the pair I want, because 3 times 8 gives me 24, and 3 plus 8 gives me the 11. So that if I take x plus 3 and x plus 8 and I FOIL it out, I'll have x squared, I'll have a 24, and then I'll have 8x and 3x, which is how I end up with 11x. A lot of people will be like, okay, I don't understand how you get the, what the 11x is for, because I get that we're splitting up x squared and the 24. The 11x is telling you which factor is the right factor. Otherwise, we could just pick whatever factor we wanted. Now, we're going to add negatives in here and see how that makes this more interesting. On B, x squared plus 9x minus 10. When I split this up, start the same way. 2 parentheses with an x at the beginning. We're looking for what multiplies to get negative 10. That will add to get me 9x. So we could do this a couple different ways. We could say, okay, well, here's if it was positive, 1 times 10, 2 times 5. And then we could try to add in negatives to make it work. Or you could make a list that has a single negative in each spot. So negative 1 times 10 or 1 times negative 10. Negative 2 times 5 or 2 times negative 5. Those are all the options of how we can get a negative 10. We want to pick the numbers that when you add them together give us 9. So let's look at like this one, for instance. Negative 2 plus 5 would give us 3. That's not what we want. But negative 1 plus 10 gives us a positive 9. So this is the pair we want. The 1 is negative and the 10 is positive. So I'm going to put x minus 1 and x plus 10. By the way, the order of these parentheses does not matter, but it does matter that you have the right sign with the right number. So I wrote x minus 1 times x plus 10, but you could have written it with the x plus 10 first and the x minus 1 second. And that's fine. Let's look at the next one. So we've got 18. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. We've got 18 here. What multiplies to get 18 and adds to get negative 11? Now, how do we multiply to get a positive number, but add those numbers together and get a negative? Well, this is the situation where we maybe can think of what the positive answer is. That'd be 2 times 9. If I add those together, I get positive 11. But if I make them both negative, then what happens? So if they're both negative, when I multiply them together, the negatives cancel out and they give me plus 18. When I add them together, a negative 2 plus a negative 9 gives me negative 11. So when you see that the last number is positive, like on A and C, that means that your two numbers you're looking for have to either both be positive, because a positive times a positive is a positive, or they have to both be negative. And the way we decide depends on what is in this, what's the sign of the middle term. Okay, so this is going to be x minus 2 and x minus 9, or it could be written the other way, and that's fine. The last situation with the negative that can happen here is that is similar actually to what happened on B. So if this is negative, I'm going to need one of my two parentheses to have a negative. Okay, and you could even, I don't know that I really like this idea, but you could even like start by saying, okay, I know one of them needs to be negative, so I'm going to have a plus in one and a minus in the other. Now let's think, what multiplies to get 56, negative 56, that will add to get me negative 1. And that might seem like impossible, but what we would be looking for is, since one of them can be negative, it's really like we're subtracting the factors to get negative 1. I'm going to make my list. 7 and 8 are 1 apart. So if I make one of these negative, they'd multiply and give me negative 56. But now which one do I need to make negative so that I would get a -1 instead of a +1? Is the right way to do this -7 plus 8, or is it -8 plus 7? Sorry, I was like, wait, what's the opposite of this? -7 plus 8, where 8's bigger and is positive, gives us a +1. -8 plus 7, where the bigger number is the 8, but now it's negative, would give us -1. So we want a -1. I'm going to use -8 and +7. So I already wrote the negative and the positive here. I just need to match it up with the correct one. So practice, 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 so much practice. Typically, you know, this is one of those things that can seem really difficult until you kind of have this like aha moment and then it starts to click. But in order to make that happen as soon as possible, we need to do lots of practice. I have lots of videos where I have done factoring. I can give you like a million factoring problems if you need it. I can work with you on it one-on-one. You just gotta let me know. I will point out real quick also, this is when a equals 1, and what that's referring to is the fact that all of these start with an x squared. None of them start with a number in front of that x squared. So like 2x squared or 3x squared. And thanks so much for watching.